It happened in an instant, a silent citywide gasp you couldn't hear but could absolutely feel. 1 minute you're scrolling through the morning's headlines, sipping your coffee, the little blue light on your router blinking its faithful rhythm. The next, nothing. The screen freezes on a half-loaded picture of a cat. You tap it, nothing. You toggle the Wi-Fi off, then on again, still nothing. A flicker of annoyance, that familiar New York City impatience starts to bubble up. You can practically hear the collective groan of 8 million people realizing their digital leash just snapped. It's not just your apartment, you realize. You glance out the window, your neighbor across the way, the one with the loud dog, staring at his phone with the same confused frown. The usual morning hum of the city feels off, replaced by an eerie quiet. The digital chatter that underpins every single moment of modern life has vanished. No pings, no dings, no endless stream of notifications demanding your attention. For the first time in a decade, the air itself feels empty. The smell of burnt toast wafts from an open window, a strangely analog scent in a suddenly analog world. Panic, that old familiar friend in the city, begins its slow creep. It starts small, a knot in your stomach as you realize your work-from-home day is now just a work-from-home with no work day. But then the implications start to stack up like cars in a rush hour pileup. How do you pay for the subway? Your Metro card is on your phone. How do you check if the trains are even running? The MTA app is a useless brick. How do you tell your boss you can't log on? You can't remember their actual phone number. It's written down, of course, in a file on your cloud drive. The initial shock quickly morphs into a low-grade citywide anxiety attack. People spill out onto their stoops and sidewalks holding their phones up to the sky as if pleading with some unseen digital deity to restore the signal. They talk to each other, strangers asking strangers, "You got anything?" The answer is always the same, a shake of the head. The first real domino to fall was the money. The little bodega on the corner, the one that's been there forever, was the first to react. A piece of cardboard scrawled in black marker appeared taped to the glass door. Cash only. No, really. Inside, the usual morning rush for coffee and a bagel had turned into a frantic hunt for physical currency. People were digging through purses and pockets, pulling out lint-covered dollar bills and handfuls of loose change. The kid behind the counter, who usually just scans QR codes with a bored sigh, was now doing math in his head, his brow furrowed in concentration. The scent of fresh coffee was thick in the air, a comforting aroma amidst the rising tension. Out on the avenues, the traffic lights began their death rattle. Some froze on green, others on red, and many just went completely dark, turning major intersections into free-for-alls. Without the central network to coordinate them, the city's circulatory system seized up. The sound of car horns, usually just background noise, became a sharp, angry symphony of chaos. You saw a traffic cop, her face a mask of grim determination, march into the middle of Delancey Street, blowing her whistle with the force of a hurricane. For a moment, drivers just stared, forgetting what to do without a red or green light to obey. Then slowly, they started listening, following her frantic hand signals. The bigger stores were hit even harder. At the entrance to a huge downtown department store, metal security gates were half closed. The checkout systems were down, the scanners useless, the credit card machines inert. A manager stood outside, wringing her hands and apologizing to a growing line of frustrated shoppers. "We can't process anything." But in the smaller shops, a different spirit was emerging. A woman came up short for a loaf of bread. The man behind her simply handed her a $5 bill and said, "Get it next time." That small act of trust felt monumental. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on everyone. Humor, that quintessential New York coping mechanism, started to surface. You heard one guy yell to his friend across the street, "Hey, you think my crypto is safe?" which got a round of weary laughter. Another person was trying to pay for a hot dog with a transit pass, arguing that it was preloaded with value. The vendor wasn't buying it, but he was smiling. These little sparks of wit were like flares in the dark, reminders that even when the systems fail, the city's personality, its stubborn, wisecracking soul, remains stubbornly online. Nowhere was the outage felt more acutely than inside the city's hospitals. The intricate digital web that connects patient records, lab results, and pharmacy orders was gone. Doctors and nurses, accustomed to instant access on tablets, were suddenly flying blind. They fell back on the old ways, a frantic scramble for pen and paper, hallways filled with staff huddled together, shouting information down corridors. Clipboards became the most valuable technology. A nurse paused to gently pat an elderly patient's hand. The flow of information to the public ground to a halt. News websites were blank, social media feeds were silent. For a while, the only news was no news. Then old technology sputtered back to life. AM radio stations on generators became the city's lifeline. People gathered in parks around cars and on street corners with radios turned up. Teens set up a makeshift town square with a whiteboard posting updates. Work largely stopped without texting or email, but some adapted. Architects met in a park, sketching on a roll of paper across a picnic table, talking, laughing, pointing. Their collaboration was more animated and physical than a video call. People had to actually look at each other, read expressions, not emojis. Stories of practical kindness began to spread. A woman with a paper map guided lost tourists in the subway. A retired electrician checked on elderly neighbors door to door. Simple acts of community, neighbors helping neighbors. Rediscovering the offline social network built on proximity, eye contact, and shared place. As the day wore on, the initial panic subsided. A strange calm began to settle over the city. For kids, the morning's boredom and frustration gave way to a dawning sense of possibility. With tablets and game consoles rendered useless, parents were forced to dig deep in the closets, unearthing dusty boxes of board games not seen in years. The sound of dice rattling in a plastic cup, the cheerful shout of "Uno." You could feel the soft, worn texture of an old deck of cards as a teenager patiently taught her grandfather a new game. This rediscovery of the physical world wasn't just for kids. Adults, untethered from their digital obligations, began to look around as if seeing their own homes for the first time. Books were pulled from shelves, their spines cracked open with a satisfying sound. The faint, musty smell of old paper filled living rooms. People sat on their front stoops, not staring at screens but actually talking to the neighbors they usually only nodded to. A woman who had a small garden on her fire escape was showing the kid from upstairs how to tell which tomatoes were ripe. Their heads bent together in the afternoon sun. The city itself felt different. The relentless pace had eased. Without GPS, delivery drivers were stopping to ask for directions, unfolding vast, creased paper maps on the hoods of their trucks. People were walking more, exploring their own neighborhoods with a new curiosity. You saw groups of friends gathered in the park, not for a coordinated event, but just because it was a place to be together. Someone had brought a guitar and a small impromptu sing-along had started, the unamplified voices surprisingly clear in the quiet air. It was a city breathing at a human pace. Even the simple act of preparing a meal changed. Without the ability to look up a recipe or order takeout with a few taps, people were forced to improvise, to rely on what they had in their pantries and what they remembered. The day became a series of small, analog triumphs, successfully navigating across town using only street signs, finishing a crossword puzzle, having a long conversation that wasn't interrupted by a single notification. It was a forced mindfulness, a day-long lesson in the art of being present in the one and only place you could be, right here, right now. As dusk settled, casting long shadows between the skyscrapers, the city was lit by a softer, warmer glow. Streetlights powered by their own circuits still worked, but the ubiquitous bluish light from millions of screens was gone, and then, as suddenly as it had vanished, it returned. A phone buzzed on a nearby table, a startlingly loud noise in the newfound quiet. A television flickered to life in a window across the street. The internet was back, a collective sigh of relief, quickly followed by a frantic rush of beeps, chimes, and notifications, swept across the 5 boroughs. The return to normalcy was immediate and overwhelming. For a moment, everyone was glued to their screens again, catching up on the missed chaos. The memes that were already being generated about the great unplugging, and the official explanations that were starting to trickle out. It felt good, that familiar rush of connection and information, and yet something felt different. The relief was tinged with a strange sense of loss, a nostalgia for the quiet day that was already fading into memory. The air in the room, which had felt so calm, now seemed to crackle with a nervous digital energy. The day left an indelible mark. It was a stark and terrifying reminder of our profound fragility, of how the complex global systems we depend on for everything from our finances to our food supply hang by the thinnest of digital threads. The vulnerability was laid bare for all to see. The experience sparked a new, urgent conversation about backups, redundancies, and the importance of having a plan B. We saw how quickly things could unravel and that knowledge is not something you can easily forget even after all the lights come back on. But the day was also a gift. It was a forced reset, a citywide experiment in living differently. We learned that when the digital world goes dark, the human world lights up. We learned that we still know how to talk to each other, how to help a stranger, how to read a map, and how to be bored and then find our own fun. We were reminded that community is not a network of servers, but a network of people. As the noise of the internet rushed back in, the hope was that we could hold on to a little piece of that silence, that we could choose to unplug every now and then and find that slower, kinder, more human world waiting for us.